In this video, I give my complete breakdown on why the Niners offensive line is not just going to be okay, it's going to be elite this year. I went ahead and combined all of these videos in one easy to watch place. I hope you guys enjoy. The offensive line is a group of players that frankly don't get talked about enough in football. And when they do get talked about, it often is surrounded by negativity. In today's video and subsequent videos, I hope to break down the 49ers offensive line a little bit more deeply. In this video, we'll focus on the Niners offensive philosophy and how that specifically affects the offensive line. And in subsequent videos, I hope to break down each position individually. But before we jump into today's video, which focuses on the offensive line's philosophy and what the Niners actually do on the offensive side of the ball, I want to take this time out to thank the request of today's video, Omnion12, and sorry if I butchered that name, I'm terrible with names, but if you guys ever have a request, go ahead and leave it down below and I'll definitely see if I'll be able to make a video about it. So with that out of the way, it's time to dive a little bit deeper into the Niners offensive line. And we need to start with their offensive line coach, Chris Foerster, and his background so we understand the foundational piece of the offensive line, which is their coach. Chris Foerster has an extremely long NFL career that includes 2 stints with the Niners dating back to 2008. So I'm going to go ahead and try to break down some of his highlights in his career and what you expect out of him as a coach. When examining Chris Foerster's career, it becomes obvious that he's one of the greatest offensive line coaches across the entire NFL. Let's look at Foerster's first gig as an offensive line coach and assistant head coach for the Baltimore Ravens from 2005 to 2007. Perhaps Foerster's biggest accomplishment during this period was the future Pro Football Hall of Fame inductee Jonathan Ogden. During his time with Foerster, he made the Pro Bowl in all 3 seasons. Furthermore, in 2007, running back Willis McGahee rushed for 1,207 yards, which was the second highest total across his entire career. He also earned a Pro Bowl trip. And I'm highlighting the running backs here because often the offensive line is crucial for running back success. Furthermore, in 2006, the Ravens offensive team set team records for fewest sacks allowed, 17, and most wins in the season, 13 with Foerster. Foerster then went on to join San Francisco for the first time and did great things, helping Frank Gore rush for 1,120 yards, his 4th consecutive 1,000-yard season, and also helped Gore set a career high of 10 rushing touchdowns this season. He was selected to the Pro Bowl that season. After his time with the Niners, Foerster bounced around a little bit, but in 2012, he found his way onto Kyle Shanahan's offense in Washington, and he led a unit that helped rush for 2,709 yards. That was a team record. Morris, the running back of that team, set a single season team high rushing yards with 1,613. During this period, Foerster proved to be instrumental in another tackle's development, this time Trent Williams, who saw his first 2 of his Pro Bowl honors during this time period. Foerster then jumped around and found his way onto the Miami Dolphins, where he coached for 2 seasons from 2016 to 2017. During the 2016 season, Foerster's offensive line once again proved to be instrumental. During the last 11 games of that season, the offensive line helped the Dolphins rank 3rd in the NFL per rushing yards per game and tied for 3rd for only 13 sacks allowed. This was a team that was awful before Foerster got there on the offensive line. Foerster was then released from the Miami Dolphins mainly due to a personal conduct issue, which if you guys are interested, you can go ahead and search that video. I'm not going to get into it too much here, but the Niners, despite having this personal conduct issue, because of his connection with Kyle Shanahan, Shanahan brought in Foerster, and the Niners haven't looked back since because they've been largely productive with him. For instance, last year, the Niners were top 10 in both pass blocking and run blocking grades according to Pro Football Focus. The only other teams to have accomplished that were the Eagles, Falcons, and Ravens. So now that we understand Chris Foerster is one of the best offensive line coaches across the entire league, which is highlighted by Hall of Fame players and Pro Bowl players all across his time, coupled with having some of the best efficiencies for both pass and run blocking. We can now dive into the 49ers core concepts, both on their run and pass side of the ball. This will help us to understand what exactly the offensive line is responsible for. The Niners offense and run game goes through one thing, and that has to be the outside zone. The offense really revolves around putting the defense in conflicts, whether it be a horizontal conflict of them deciding which way they're going to scrape, or if they're going to shoot the inside. Basically, the Niners' outside zone scheme is what drives defensive coordinators bonkers. On these plays, it becomes clear that you need an offensive line who's well conditioned, because you'll often see the offensive linemen running down the field and pulling behind the line of scrimmage. The Niners also have plenty of counters to go off this outside zone philosophy, whether it be running back to the opposite side or using the inside zone toss. So all these counters effectively do one thing, and that's put more stress on the defense, alleviating the stress that's put on the offensive line. So now that we understand how some of the stress is alleviated in the run game, we can examine how the same stress is alleviated through the pass game for the offensive line, utilizing similar concepts. One of the most important things about Kyle Shanahan's offense moving into the passing game concepts is the ability to get the ball in playmakers' hands. A way in which Kyle Shanahan does this to also challenge the defense is by making his pass plays look very similar to his run plays. This means Kyle Shanahan's passing offense relies heavily on play action passes. However, there are times where Kyle Shanahan just needs to line back and pass. In this case, Shanahan usually attacks the middle of the field and underneath coverages. This means the quarterback needs to get the ball out of his hands quickly, resulting in the offensive line not needing to hold on to their blocks as much as maybe a more deep down the field passing offense like the Arizona Cardinals. So now that we understand Chris Foerster and the Niners offensive philosophies a little bit more deeply, we can examine the type of players that may have success on this type of system. The first thing that must be said is any player that has success on the Niners will need to be extremely smart. Kyle Shanahan's offense is known for being one of the most complex. Whether you're an offensive lineman or running back, you definitely need a good head on your shoulders to be successful in Shanahan's offense. Furthermore, I'd say athleticism and the ability to pull is fundamental when selecting offensive linemen for San Francisco. Wall size is nice. It appears they value the ability to move a whole lot more, which makes sense because of the foundational core philosophies we laid out previously. In this video, we tried to examine a whole lot about the 49ers offensive line in a short period of time. We did this by primarily examining Chris Foerster's background up to this point, and furthermore, examining the Niners' philosophy when it comes to their offensive side of the ball. But this is only the beginning, because as we all know, players are the people to actually win games. So while having a great coaching philosophy and having great coaches is nice, it means nothing if your offensive lineman simply can't play. In the following videos in this series, I hope to go through each position: left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, and right tackle, mainly focusing on the right side of the offensive line to start. So if this is something that you guys are interested in, make sure to go ahead. The San Francisco 49ers have been fortunate to have some of the best left tackle play across the entire NFL since they acquired Trent Williams via a trade with Washington for only a 5th round pick. This was ultimately just like a year lease, and they gave him a massive $138 million contract for 6 years. But according to Pro Football Focus, that is worth every single penny, because since joining the Niners in 2020, he's been the highest graded tackle each season. and Williams has earned a grade of at least 91.9 in each of his 3 seasons, with his best mark coming in 2021 with a 97.8 mark that season. But before we jump into the left tackle position, and specifically Trent Williams for the San Francisco 49ers offensive line, I want to mention this is part of a bigger series, and I've already released part 1 that really goes over the 49ers offensive line philosophy, the type of players they're looking for. So if you're interested in that, I'll go ahead and link it at the end of this video. Also coming out today is a breakdown of Spencer Burford, so look out for that. So with that out of the way, to say Trent Williams is an athletic freak is an understatement. When we look at his measurables, he comes in at a crazy 6'4" and 5'8" in his pre-draft measurables and weighing 315 pounds. But despite this, he ran his 40-yard dash in 4.88 seconds and his 10-yard split in maybe a more impressive 1.72 seconds. Furthermore, he was extremely strong on the bench press, putting it up 23 times. However, as we begin to dive deeper into Trent Williams' career, it becomes obvious that his athletic profile is maybe the least of the reasons of why he's been such a great tackle across his time in the NFL. Let's start with his college and high school days, because that's really where the fundamental building blocks begin. Williams attended Longview High School in Longview, Texas. He was a unanimous first-team All-District selection as a senior and entered the 2005 UIL playoffs on a 10-0 record. Ultimately, Trent Williams was fantastic and considered a 3-star recruit by Rivals.com and 24/7 Sports. Williams was also listed as the number 28 offensive guard prospect across the entire nation. Trent Williams, coming out of high school, had plenty of offers, including from Oklahoma, Louisiana State, Oklahoma State, and Texas A&M. Ultimately, Williams chose the offer from Oklahoma over those other teams, and played for the Oklahoma Sooners from 2006 all the way to 2009. Williams made an immediate impact as a freshman. During this year, he was named to the Sporting News Freshman All-American Second Team. During his time at Oklahoma, he transferred from the guard position to the right tackle position. And in his sophomore year, Williams saw action in 14 games, and as a junior in 2008, he started all 14 games, the first at left tackle and the remaining 13 at right tackle. This season had to be Trent Williams' most dominant season, registering 131 knockdowns. Trent Williams went on to finish up his college career with an impressive senior year, being named first team All Big 12 selections, a repeat from 2008, and he was named for the first time a consensus All-American. So with Trent Williams' football career finished up in college, it was time for scouts to peel back the layers and look at his strengths as well as his weaknesses. His strengths definitely was his athletic ability, really his build in general. He has long arms, his solid height and bulk, he's quick, nice lateral movement, consistent footwork. He's a first-round tackle. He's exactly what you expect to have. But they did see some weaknesses, such as questioning his demeanor and actually his aggressiveness in the run game. But despite this, Washington decided to draft Trent Williams in the 2010 NFL Draft with the 4th pick overall. Trent Williams was fantastic too ever since he had the opportunity to join an NFL team. Some of his highlights throughout his career include 10 Pro Bowls from 2012 all the way to 2018, and then once again in that stint from 2020 to 2022. He was a second-team All-Pro player though in 2015, and 2 first-team All-Pros in 2021 and 2022. But why did Washington give up Trent Williams for essentially nothing? Well, this is where his cancer diagnosis begins. In April 2019, it was reported that Williams had a surgical procedure to remove a growth from his head, which was diagnosed as, sorry if I butcher this name, it's dermatomucosa protuberans, DFSB for short, a type of cancer. The growth was first noticed in 2013, but the Redskins medical staff told him it was not serious. Williams, understandably frustrated, tried to get out of the team as soon as possible, requesting to be traded. And when Washington didn't trade him before the trade deadline, Williams was unable to pass the physical exam because of soreness he dealt with after getting the cancer removed that Washington previously said not to worry about. In 2020, Williams finally had permission to request a trade and seek out a trade. So one of the people he looked towards was Kyle Shanahan, who actually coached him back in 2012 when Robert Griffin was a thing, and Chris Forrester also was back there for the developmental years of Trent Williams' career. So Trent Williams decided to join San Francisco, and the Niners luckily didn't have to give up much despite him being one of the greatest tackles of all time. They only exchanged a 5th round pick in the 2020 NFL draft and a 3rd round pick in the 2021 NFL draft. Ultimately, a huge steal. And the rest has been the history since he joined San Francisco. He got that massive contract of $138 million I spoke about, but he's been fantastic with the Niners. He is getting older though, and that leads to some questions. Will Trent Williams actually be able to be effective on the Niners offense this year? The first thing that we need to do in examining if Trent Williams will be effective this upcoming year is examine what the Niners actually need out of their tackles. They need tackles who have the ability to pull, so athletic freaks kinda, and also have a brain capacity to understand a complex Kyle Shanahan offense. I think Trent Williams checks off both of these nicely. But now let's get into his age and where I think Trent Williams' true strength lies. I know many people point out his athletic ability or really his technique. I think there's something that goes much deeper into a player being successful long-term in the NFL, even after having a cancer diagnosis. And that's their ability to grind and dedicate themselves to their craft. And one player that I never questioned his dedication to his craft is Trent Williams. He's constantly working on it, and each season he looks to improve. He's much like Nick Bosa in this aspect, and I'll continue to expect him to be great as long as he plays. I don't think Trent Williams is someone that's going to continue to play when he falls under a set level. I think he has high expectations for himself, and I expect him to do great things. But the Niners do need to start planning for what they're going to do once Trent Williams does decide it's time to hang up his cleats. To address this very real possibility, I hope the Niners start to pick up players in this upcoming offseason to replace Trent Williams and develop behind Colton McKivitz. We really need to start thinking about what the Niners offensive line looks like without one of the best tackles across the entire league, and how much less dominant it will be, and how that affects everything going forward. In summary, San Francisco has a fantastic left tackle, but the depth underneath him is kind of questionable because the person that used to back up Trent Williams is now actually the other starter tackle, Colton McKivitz. Now you have guys like Jalen Moore and other people that frankly haven't played a ton in the NFL backing up your offensive tackles. This really shows a lack of depth and a need to invest heavily in the offensive line this upcoming offseason and going forward, specifically at the tackle position. And I also want to give a shout out to my channel members. It's truly helpful and encouraging to have the support of you guys. So thanks. I hope you guys all have a great day. If you guys did enjoy this video, it would mean a ton if you liked and subscribed. I'll go ahead and link part 1 to the series. The San Francisco 49ers are one of the most talented teams across the entire NFL. Wherever you look, it seems like they're brimming with talent, but that doesn't mean there isn't points of concern on their roster. And possibly one of the biggest points of concern going into this 2023 season is what's going to happen at that right guard spot. But before we jump into today's video, I want to take a moment and say this is a part of a multi-part series. So if you're interested in learning more about the 49ers offensive line coach and really their philosophy, I have that broken down in an earlier video, as well as talking about Trent Williams. This is the third part of this series. With that out of the way, let's jump right into Spencer Burford and how he's going to impact the 49ers going forward. While Spencer Burford played last year, a lot of his weaknesses were kind of hidden because Daniel Brunskill rotated in a lot with Burford when he needed the rest. This ultimately led Burford to be more effective when he entered the game. But here's the thing, with Brunskill leaving, Burford has been told by Chris Forrester this is his job to lose. And while the Niners did bring in some players during free agency and the draft, none of them really seriously challenged Burford for the starting gig. So in today's video, I want to examine Burford a little bit more deeply. Throughout this video, I hope to cover what the Niners value in the offensive guard briefly before moving into Spencer Burford's athletic profile and his football career up to this point, before finally concluding what we can realistically expect out of Spencer Burford given some of his year 2 jumps. While I've broken down the 49ers offensive line philosophy and really their offensive philosophy a lot more deeply in a previous video, I want to briefly touch on the offensive guard position and what really role it plays. These guys are constantly pulling in the run game, and if they're not pulling, you'll often see them trying to scrape up and get to the second level. What this requires is a guard that has great mobility, and perhaps equally important in Kyle Shanahan's complex system is a coach that's able to keep these guys up to date with what Kyle Shanahan wants them to do. This also requires a lot on the player's part because Kyle Shanahan's offense is known for being one of the most complex. With that out of the way, let's jump into Spencer Burford's athletic profile to see if he fits the athletic freak the 49ers prioritize. Coming out of college, Spencer Burford was really impressive as a prospect. His height was 6'4" and his weight was 304 pounds. His arm length was 34 inches and 3/4. Very long, and that's great for an offensive lineman. Let's get into his combine results. His 40-yard dash came in at an impressive 5.19 seconds, and his 10-yard split of 1.8 seconds. This is better than the Niners' last offensive guard, Lincoln Tomlinson, who ran his 40-yard dash in 5.33 seconds and his 10-yard split in 1.89 seconds. He proved to be extremely effective in Kyle Shanahan's scheme, and I think that Burford will be able to have the same level of success just based solely on his athletic profile. But let's look at him as a football player a little bit more deeply. Burford started his football career at Wagner High School in San Antonio, Texas, and he was phenomenal, being labeled as a 4-star recruit. Despite this, he decided to stay in San Antonio and sign with UTSA, and he was the best rated prospect to ever sign with that team. So while Burford selected maybe a little bit of an unconventional team, I think this was great for multiple reasons for Burford. The first big one is he got to stay at home, and having that support is crucial for some people. And not just that, Burford then had the opportunity to start right away for this program, getting meaningful snaps many players just can't get. I mean, Trey Lance is still struggling to get snaps. During his time in college, Burford earned a ton of snaps and a lot of accolades. During his freshman year, he started all 10 games at left tackle, earning Conference USA All-Freshman Team. Burford continued to start throughout his UTSA career, and his best year probably came in 2021, where he started 12 games, 1 at right tackle and 11 at left tackle, but he was named the first team all-league pick. So this is a time where scouts had the opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into Burford's game and examine his strengths as well as his weaknesses. His strengths definitely had to be his broad shoulders and athletic build, just really his athletic profile showed on film. He attacks the backside and cuts off blockers with the proper angles. He also has starting experience both at tackle and guard spots. He had good foot chop, and he gets pass rushers effectively. But he did have some weaknesses perhaps that carried over a little bit into the pros, and that was ineffective run blocking technique sometimes and had narrow base as a drive blocker. What could help is if Burford added mass. He's very athletic, but kinda needed to get an NFL body. The Niners though picked up Burford in round 4 with pick 29. I think this was a huge steal because even as a rookie, he made an impact. And going into this year, I think he'll make a bigger impact. But how did he actually perform his rookie year? Well, like many offensive linemen, he had his ups and downs. But luckily for him, he's being coached by one of the best offensive line coaches across the entire league in Chris Foerster. Chris Foerster was able to set up a kind of unique situation in which Burford rotated with Brunskill. This did several things. This allowed Burford to work on his technique in certain plays, but also get the rest so he just wasn't flat out dominated at points. Burford had his strength in pass protection, but just wasn't up to par in his run protection last year. To examine how Burford actually stacked up, we need to look no farther than PFF. According to PFF, Burford allowed 4 sacks and 18 pressures as a pass blocker, which actually isn't terrible as a rookie, especially a 5th round selection essentially. He also received a well below average grade as a run blocker, receiving a grade of 49.1. However, jumping into this season, as I mentioned, Burford is the unquestioned starter. And he has made improvements that I think will be impactful on how he plays this upcoming season. Probably the biggest thing is that Burford is much bigger, is really walking on the field, carrying himself differently. He looks like he has a lot more power than he did his rookie year. Ultimately, this is what you expect out of an offensive lineman going into the NFL. Often they take 1 year to get their NFL bodies. I mean, even Aaron Banks didn't even play as a rookie. So going into this year, I'm extremely encouraged by Spencer Burford's rookie season and the tutelage he's received so far under Chris Foerster. I think that this spot on the offensive line will not be an issue. And honestly, Burford could be one of the 49ers' best offensive linemen this year. He has the athletic profile that the 49ers covet. And now with the size and strength he has added this offseason, I expect Burford to actually dominate this entire NFL year. But these are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. I also want to thank my members for the support. It truly means a ton. And if you guys are interested in more videos on the Niners offensive line, I have 2 more parts of this series out. The first part explains the 49ers offensive line and their philosophy on offense, and the second part breaks down one of the best tackles in the entire game in Trent Williams. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and pick one of these videos. And if you did enjoy this video, it would mean a ton if you liked and subscribed. I hope you guys all have a great day. The offseason for San Francisco has been 2 main talking points. First, the quarterback problem, and secondly, what the 49ers are going to do on their offensive line and how it's going to perform this upcoming year. With plenty of articles being written about why the Niners offensive line simply won't be good enough. Not even good enough to allow the 49ers to repeat their NFC championship run. The biggest point of speculation on the Niners offensive line has to be the right tackle position, which is kind of absurd because many fans frankly didn't like Mike McGlinchey the whole entire time he was with the Niners. But now that he's gone, they're freaking out. A brief recap, Mike McGlinchey left via free agency to the Denver Broncos. This leaves the 49ers looking both inwards and outwards to fill the right tackle position. Someone they brought in via free agency is Matt Pryor, but maybe someone that's actually going to seize this job is Colton McKivitz. In this video, I hope to break down the competition between Matt Pryor and Colton McKivitz and look at the potential winner, in my opinion's career up to this point, and see what they're actually going to offer the Niners athletically, what scouts have been saying about them their whole entire career, and really, do the Niners have a problem at right tackle? But before we jump right into this video, I do want to mention that this is part of a bigger series. So I'll go ahead and link the start of this series at the end of this video. It dives into the Niners offensive philosophy as well as their coach Chris Foerster and what he's accomplished across the entire NFL. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the competition between Matt Pryor and Colton McKivitz. The first thing we need to talk about before we get right into this competition is what the Niners actually value in their offensive tackles. And we need to look no farther than their left tackle, Trent Williams. He has freakish athleticism, he has the smarts, really everything you want. But realistically, you can't get away with paying two Trent Williams and having Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and players like that on your offense. So overall, I would say the Niners value a tackle who has agility in the run game, but also is adequate in the pass game, which is where Mike McGlinchey would struggle at times. He was great in running games, but often we get thrown over in the pass game. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at Matt Pryor versus Colton McKivitz by first looking at their athletic profile. Colton McKivitz was selected by the Niners back in 2020 in the 5th round, pick 7. He was 6'6", 306 pounds. His arm length is almost 34 inches. He ran his 40-yard dash in an impressive 5.35 seconds and a 10-yard split of 1.8 seconds. That's really great, and I think that's more than adequate for Kyle Shanahan's offense. In comparison, Matt Pryor was bigger at his NFL combine, coming in at 6'7" and 330 pounds about, but was much slower in his 40-yard dash, running that in around 5.6 seconds and his 10-yard split in 1.98 seconds, according to NFL combine results. In this breakdown, comparing Colt McKivitz and Matt Pryor, we see that Matt Pryor is a bigger tackle prospect, but does suffer athletically speaking in comparison to Colton McKivitz. And since the Niners offense relies heavily on the athleticism of their offensive tackle, and since Colton McKivitz has been in this complicated offense for several years now, I do envision him taking over. Furthermore, during this offseason, Chris Forrester, the Niners offensive line coach, has come out and spoke about his belief in Colton McKivitz, saying that he's already giving Colton McKivitz the vote of confidence, saying it's his job to lose going into this last offseason. This does a couple of things. The first and most important thing is give a vote of confidence to your new starting player. He did this to Aaron Banks and Jake Brendel, and the results of those players are phenomenal, considering, frankly, many fans had little to no faith in both of those players performing as well as they did. So, with the conclusion of Colton McKivitz starting seeming like an inevitable, the question then becomes, how will Colton McKivitz actually perform? And we have some data from his time in the NFL, but it'll also be helpful to examine his career as a whole. But let's go ahead and start with his most meaningful snaps in Week 4 of the 2022 season. According to Pro Football Focus, he did fantastic during this game, putting up a pass blocking grade of 87.3, surrendering 0 pressures. Another indicator of Colton McKivitz's great pass protection came in 2020 when the Niners played the Buffalo Bills. During this game, the Niners gave up 0 sacks. So while those are some of Colton McKivitz's highlights in the NFL, we need to also examine his football career up to this point to get a better grasp of what type of player he actually is. Colton McKivitz was born in Belmont, Ohio, and started his football career at East Richland Christian High School and then transferred to Union Local High School. As a senior, McKivitz was named First Team All-Ohio. He was a 3-star recruit according to 24/7 Sports, playing both on the defensive line and offensive line. He received offers from Miami of Ohio, West Virginia, Archon, Bowling Green, Kent State, Marshall, and Toledo. Ultimately, McKivitz decided to go to West Virginia, where he was a Mountaineer from 2015 all the way to 2019. And while McKivitz started his freshman season as a redshirt, he became the Mountaineers' starting left tackle 4 games into his redshirted freshman season, after the starter tore his ACL. McKivitz started his final 10 games of that season. His sophomore year saw McKivitz move from left tackle over to right tackle. He started all 13 games this year, earning honorable mention All Big 12 Conference honors. The next year, McKivitz started all 12 games for the Mountaineers, and he moved back to left tackle his senior season and was named First Team All Big 12, the Big 12 Co-Offensive Lineman of the Year, and a second team All-American by Walter Camp and the Associated Press's third team. So a boatload of accomplishments his senior year, but I would argue maybe the most impressive thing about Colt McKivit's game isn't all of these awards he received, but really his versatility. He played both left and right tackle, and while many people think it's the same position, it's actually really hard to switch up your stance because it's literally the exact opposite. So it takes a while to have the versatility to play both positions. And Colt McKivitz, frankly, has versatility all across the entire NFL line. So with that being said, Colt McKivitz did wrap up his college football career in 2019 with all those awards I previously mentioned. This gave scouts the opportunity to dive a little bit more deeply into Colt McKivit's game, see what he did well as some of his weaknesses. And this may be a good indicator of what he may struggle with on his first year starting full-time with the Niners. So when scouts first started diving into Colt McKivit's game, his strength definitely became obvious right away. And that's the type of fight and aggression he has in him in the run game. You'd often see him driving his opposing player into the floor and getting under their skin. Furthermore, he had a great ability to double team and get up to the next level, which is a vital piece of Kyle Shanahan's offense. Furthermore, as his numbers so far in the NFL would suggest, he had a good ability to have well-balanced pass sets. However, there were weaknesses to Colt McKivit's game, such as his shorter arm length, his lack of initial pop according to the NFL scouts, and he has power that was left to be desired. However, the Niners saw Colt McKivitz a little bit differently and even dubbed him the Gold Helmet Player of that draft, which is a rare designation the Niners give it to certain players in their NFL draft process. Other players include Talanoa Hufanga and Trey Lance. And with the Gold Helmet Player still on the board in round 5, pick 7, the Niners decided to go ahead and swoop on the opportunity and picked up Colt McKivitz in the 2020 NFL Draft. So with that being said, we have gone over Colt McKivit's NFL career highlights up to this point, so we won't go over that again, but we do need to compare how he's going to play in comparison to his predecessor, Mike McGlinchey. And here's the thing, I actually expect Colt McKivitz to be a better pass blocker in the NFL in comparison to Mike McGlinchey. McGlinchey struggled at points, and I think, frankly, McKivitz is a better pass blocker, which I think is more important in the NFL offense that's moving more and more pass heavy every year. But he may struggle a little bit in comparison to Mike McGlinchey, who was just flat out dominant in the run game. I don't think it's going to end up being a huge deal, and ultimately, I do think that Colt McKivitz is going to see a high level of success like guys like Jake Brendel, Aaron Banks, and even Spencer Burford. And the big reason I have so much faith in Colt McKivitz is the Niners offensive line coach, Chris Foerster. And if you guys haven't caught my video about Chris Foerster and his offensive line philosophy, I'll go ahead and link it right here. And thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you guys did enjoy, it would mean a ton if you liked and subscribed. The offensive line for San Francisco has been a point of speculation this entire offseason. And so far in this series, I've tried to cover a large portion of it, whether it be Chris Foerster's offensive line philosophy or specific players. In this video, I hope to dive a little bit deeper into the Niners offensive line and break down their center and left guard. Last year, both Jake Brendel, the center, and the left guard, Aaron Banks, were seen kinda as bust, and many people questioned the 49ers' decision actually to start them and move off players like Laken Tomlinson and their former center, Alex Mack. And despite a seemingly large jump off from Alex Mack and Laken Tomlinson, both Pro Bowl players, we didn't see a huge drop off in production from Aaron Banks or Jake Brendel. But before we dive right into their last year numbers, we need to understand what everyone was saying about Jake Brendel and Aaron Banks. Aaron Banks was selected not last year, but the previous year in the draft in the second round, so many people had the expectation that Banks would just come in and start immediately. This wasn't the case. During that whole entire year, he had to rework his body according to the offensive line coach Chris Foerster. This helped him a lot because the following year he was fantastic. Furthermore, Jake Brendel is someone that's kind of stuck around Chris Foerster his whole entire career, and he's really been the developmental piece that Chris Foerster has continued to work on. And being inserted into the lineup last year, he saw himself receive Pro Bowl recognition. According to Pro Football Focus, Jake Brendel definitely deserved this. In the 2022 regular season, Brendel allowed just 12 pressures on 591 pass blocking snaps. His pressure rate of 2.03% ranked 4th best out of 34 qualifying centers. The only people better than him were Corey Linsley, Jason Kelce, and Josh Myers. During the playoffs, we didn't see Brendel drop off a cliff either. He still had a respectable rate of 2.25%. Brendel doesn't just excel in pass blocking though, he's also exceptional at run blocking. According to ESPN, he ranked 5th best among centers with a win mark rate of 72%. Moving on to Banks, he actually performed better than Laken Tomlinson in the same year. According to Pro Football Focus, his grade last year was 62.7, while Tomlinson received a grade of 56.8, actually an upgrade over Tomlinson. According to Pro Football Focus, Banks finished the regular season allowing just 1 sack and 2 quarterback hits on 526 pass blocking snaps. Banks does have room for improvement, specifically on his run blocking. According to Pro Football Focus, he had a run blocking grade of 59.1. That definitely can be better, and I think he will be better this year as he continues to fill out his body and gets a firmer grasp of Kyle Shanahan's offense. So now that we understand that both Aaron Banks and Jake Brendel proved to be extremely effective their first year starting, despite many people labeling them as bust and forever backups. I mean, even Jake Brendel was just a career backup until he was 30 essentially, and then Chris Foerster was able to insert him and make him a Pro Bowl level player. This is why I think San Francisco's offensive line is going to be just fine. Colton McKivitz is someone that San Francisco has been watching over and over, so they know exactly what they have, and Chris Foerster isn't someone who's blindly putting faith into people because he's been around the NFL for a long time. And since his career is full of illustrious talent and him just being able to really make the most out of people everywhere he goes, I think the Niners offensive line will be just fine this upcoming season. I know many people are very concerned about the Niners offensive line, but Jake Brendel and Aaron Banks to me highlight the importance of having faith in the Niners offensive line, especially their offensive line coach, who has reaffirmed his worth throughout his NFL career. So going forward, examining the center and left guard position, I think that's going to be Jake Brendel and Aaron Banks for the foreseeable future. And that's a great thing because your left side of your line is rock solid. Going from left to right, you have Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, and then you start getting into guys like Burford and Colton McKivitz, which many people do have question marks about, to be fair. And these questions that they have often come down to one thing, and it's the same thing that led many people to speculate Aaron Banks and Jake Brendel simply wouldn't be good, and that's the unknown. Fans don't know what these players offer, since simply put, they haven't seen a whole lot of game time. But their coach, Chris Foerster, has had a record of developing Hall of Fame players. Ultimately, this year, thanks to Chris Foerster and just really the strength of the offensive line and the players that I've previously broke down in previous parts of this series, I think the Niners offensive line is going to be just fine. And not just fine, I think they're going to be a top 10 unit. This is, however, just what I believe, and I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. It would also mean a ton to me if you liked and subscribed. Thank you guys so much for watching.